All right, in today's D&D series, we're going to be discussing my battle priest. Now, I'm going to touch on two things that I think are super interesting that you should take into consideration when you want to draw or design your own character. Again, for context, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Antonio. I've been a professional concept artist in the game and film industry for 8 years. I ran my own studio, and now I build Artwod, the only and world's best way to learn how to draw, giving you the full digital experience online. This is the finished result, and as always, not super rendered. I liked a bit of that painterly approach. I really like to have a bit of that when you zoom in, still have a bit of texture in the rendering, and I really like to handle my rendering like an inker. That's why I'm such an advocate for learning how to draw and ink, because it's basically just inking with brushstrokes. But let's get into it first and foremost. If we go to step one, you can see that I always work very scribbly, and I would advise anyone to at least try this. This isn't for everyone, and it's not that your scribbles will look amazing right off the bat. Every time I scribble now, it is, of course, infused with knowledge that I understand of characters, both the proportions, what I want to do in the acting, what I think about in terms of foreshortening, and also the volume that I overall want to portray. But I do want to stress that what's interesting about scribbling is that even if you just have a basic understanding of, let's say, the mannequin and, how you would, again, put the mannequin in perspective, right? And how you would sort of orient the body, make the head a bit bigger, how you would orient the body in perspective towards you. Because this is literally what I'm thinking about, right? And this is what every artist is thinking about when they're building characters. At least professional artists are thinking about this. They're thinking in simple terms, right? You can have very complex mannequins. You have very simple mannequins. I usually like to think about simple mannequins. But what you then do is, like, you have this sort of in your mind's eye, just these simple building blocks. You don't have to overcomplicate it. But then my scribbling process is just like going, right, I'll probably have a head here, and then, something like this. And I want the shoulders over here. I want the arm to go like this. I'm really working very fast. And it's not because I don't know what I'm doing. It's just because I'm trying to find interesting shapes. So I'm not that worried about having the perfect form in space. That's not what it's about now. I always say this, right? We try to find an graphically interesting shape, and then from there, we reverse engineer form into it, right? And that's literally what I'm doing. And then I don't want to commit. And I think this is important. You don't necessarily always want to commit too early on. You want to keep the exploration phase as not as long as you want, but as thorough as you can, in terms of, you have a certain pose, and in this case of like, oh, this is something interesting, but then I'll just take a new layer and I'll erase some stuff and try something new. And then I ended up with this, and like, at least now I can go from bigger to smaller shapes and play with the head a little bit and be like, oh, I do like the fact how I'm implying the face now. There's like a unique sort of characteristic to it, even if it's just in a sketch like this. And I do like what he's doing with his hands now, and the posing feels a bit more like how I want it to. And then I did another scribble on top of that and ended up with this. So this might feel like refinement, but it's not. Again, I'm just looking for shapes. But this is where I ended it before I went into detailing. I think it's important to mention this. Once I have made the decision to commit, then I will commit completely, and I probably won't deviate anymore from the overall pose and the acting of the character. So the first thing I want to say is that for me, acting is very important, even if it's in a very more neutral pose. I don't think acting always has to be high action, high dynamics. It can be very subtle, and I actually like subtlety in my character designs, especially if you want to make a character design sheet. It doesn't have to be that you want to hide everything, because in action poses, you're going to hide a lot of maybe the costume design that you want to show off, or like the way that you want to portray what class they are, what weapons they have, whatever you want to portray, right? So usually I will opt for a more neutral pose, but what I don't like, and this is something I've said before, is that I don't like posing my characters. I like my characters to be acting. So what I would focus on is having them do their thing, and I will capture them in the moment. And this is what I think about, and this is how I try to maybe get in the head or inside of the head of my characters a bit of their thinking, and then I'm trying to capture that moment. Now, before you do anything else, make sure that you click the link in the description and get our free ebook. This book is absolutely fantastic. Some of you won't even understand why it's free. We didn't need to make it for free, but we wanted to make it for free for several reasons. But one of the main reasons we wanted to make it for free is, one, it's accessible, and it just gets everyone that uses the book and reads the book gets an insight into actually how we teach, our unique teaching philosophy at Artwod. It gives you an insight into primarily what you'll be learning in our Artwod Beginner Road and applying, and it will give you these aha moments into how we at Artwod make you intuitive at perspective and how we really help you better to draw from imagination in a very approachable manner. So you'll get these aha moments of why we teach this philosophy, especially our staple unique approach to form manipulation that you won't learn anywhere else, on how to really look at form, how to be able to manipulate form that then turns into actual believable things that you can draw from imagination. We've supplemented some of our YouTube videos where you can go watch how we use these methods and principles and then create cool things. You'll get a really good insight into our beginner road and how to understand better what it takes to draw from imagination. And that, I think, we've done such a good job with this book. And you can get it for free, all right? Like I said, we don't need to make money from this book. I naturally believe that all the value you get from this book, you're going to want to practice that, and that will lead you to Artwod anyway. We sort of want to unveil some of the secrets we have at Artwod on how to better get people into learning to draw from imagination. That's what this book is for. That will naturally kind of give you a hunger to do more, as it should, because drawing is awesome, especially when you can do it from imagination. Click the link in the description, get this book. It's truly awesome, and it's free. And then from there, I will go and refine it as best as I can. Now, I've done this a million times, so I don't need to do one layer and then another layer and then another layer, because I've tried to mimic Kim Young-gi many, many times. I sort of cultivated this ability, and that's what I like about studying masters, to go from a very rough to very refined, because I tried to, like Kim Young-gi, go to immediately refined, from the get-go without an underdrawing, which is incredibly hard to do because you have to envision the sketch and the shapes at the same time. And by doing that, it has taught me to be very efficient with how I lay down my lines to get a more refined sketch or drawing. And so this is a bit more of an advanced concept, but I always like to think of it in this way. I actually, when it comes to character design, I also think about composition, the graphic composition. So let's imagine my character just being a grid. If you haven't, I'll explain it here. But usually in composition, we like to think about areas of detail and areas of rest. That usually means, if we do it on a small scale, that if this is your entire composition, then you'll have dedicated areas of detail that usually are not the same shape, just for shape interest's sake, and everything else will be rest. So there will be less detail and less noise, because if you make everything noisy, the entire image becomes noisy, right? Now, a lot of people understand this concept in landscape or environment design and general composition, but it's actually, for me at least, it's the exact same for characters. So what I do is I break up my characters into a grid. So I would look at my characters vertically and horizontally, and I'd be like, I probably want either some like detail here and here, or I would want, I could do it in 4 sections as well. I could have like, I want detail around the head, I want detail around the waist, but then I don't want too much detail in the middle, and then I'll probably want some detail here, right? And maybe here, but not that much because we're down here and it's not that important. And so you'll usually see this reflected in a lot of my character design, is that I will have detail here and detail here, and I'll leave some rest, and I'll have detail here and detail on this side. And so it's subtle, but it does help me sort of frame myself and primarily restrain myself for adding too much detail everywhere. Now, if I were to just make this into a drawing, I would take this a lot further and I would render with lines. But because I know I'm going to turn it into a painting, I don't bother with too much detail in the line work. Right, and then moving on, I simply go into flat colors. I don't think that needs any explanation. That's very self-explanatory. I like more earthed tones or more earthy tones. I don't like, or I'm not even good at very flashy and saturated tones and making them work. I know a lot of people are very good at that. I'm not good at that. So that's that. Then usually what I will try to do is I'll try to find my first indication of form. And usually this is with either a good sort of indication of shadow shapes. But again, if you look at my shadow shapes, what I try to do as well is I try to keep most of the shadows in the areas of interest, and I'll leave most of it out of it in the areas where I don't want people to look. And what I mean with these shadow shapes, like these cast shadows that I've talked about before, is the cast shadows, they will give it more contrast, and therefore it will demand more attention. So I don't want that attention everywhere. What I want, if I want a rendered piece, is I will focus on the halftones. And you'll see that in the next iterations, is that I'm just focusing on adding more halftones. And this is the finished piece. The only thing I'm doing from adding in some halftones to the finished piece is just getting rid of the line work in the areas where I want it to feel painterly. And I'll usually leave my lines in the areas that I'm not finishing, because the lines will still contain the drawing or the painting. And that's my entire process. It's actually pretty straightforward. And as I said, I like to have a systematized way of going about things because it gives me consistent results. I'm not saying that a lot of you that are hobbyists that just want to draw your D&D characters, you'll have that, but it's good to cultivate it if you want to get to a consistent level of drawing your own characters and getting a consistent level of quality with them as well. Now, the second thing that I actually wanted to emphasize, apart from having a character act instead of posing, what I really, really, really like, and it's something that gives an extra layer of believability, for me at least, in character design or any creature design in general. And it's something I see every beginner make the same mistake over and over and over. As soon as your character has any type of props, you put it in a profile angle and you forget or you disregard perspective completely. And it just kills the entire illusion, right? So a lot of you, and this is actually the detriment of it, a lot of you will force your character into a pose so that it fits your lack of understanding of perspective to create a 2D version of the prop you want to add to your character, because you just don't understand perspective. So you're forcing your character into a pose it unnaturally would be in, just so you can make your sword or your axe or your cross in 2D, because you don't understand perspective. Well, one, you don't understand perspective, and two, you think you need to show off the prop or the weapon in its entirety, and that's not true at all. So for me, a big part of adding believability is having the absolute capability to turn whatever prop you want to give your character in perspective, and even like very much forced perspectives, or like a lot of foreshortening. And all in all, it's not that hard to do if you understand how to draw in perspective, right? Because it's more about understanding manipulated forms in perspective. It's not that much about understanding the entire prop in perspective, because basically an axe is a box. So if we were to break down, right, or just the axe part itself, right, in a boxy shape, it would just be this. And the way that I drew it is that, it's a bit manipulated. And so it joins in the middle, and then you have this bowie part, and it does the same on the other side, right? This is highly simplified, but if I understand that box and I can foreshorten that box and rotate it a little bit, like what you see me doing in this perspective, like this, I can still draw that axe in that forced perspective that I have it in. right? And have no issues with drawing it that way because I understand the manipulated forms of which it consists. And that's why I want you to focus on forms as well, because this makes your character so much more believable because you believe it's pointing an axe towards, or at least in the direction of the camera. And that's what you do in real life as well. If someone takes a picture of you, you have something pointing towards the camera, or you're holding a glass towards the camera, whatever it is, right? It's this perception of depth that literally adds depth to your character designs as well. And so you shouldn't shy away from that. It actually is one of the biggest indicators of amateurism, or the fact that you really seem like you're a beginner, because you're forcing everything into a 2D point of view that completely kills the illusion of having a character or a believable character. So that those are two things that would instantly, overnight, make your character designs better. If you focus on acting instead of posing, and if you understand how the props that they're holding are held in perspective. Super important, and it will just elevate your character designs from here to here. And I'm always trying to actually find excuses to do it because it works so well, because I love it. And you don't always have to show off the entire prop or the entire weapon. You can do that in a call out if you want to be like a concept artist. For those of you that are aspiring to be a professional, you can do that in a call out where you show off the sword and its nice design and the orthographic view and rotations, whatever you want, right? That's for the modelers. You're not trying to sell this to modelers. This is to sell the entire package. It's to sell the illusion of your character. It's to sell the character itself. And for that, you don't need to show off everything of the prop. People can, that's the beautiful thing of the mind. We can fill in the details ourselves once we look at it. All right? So that's all I wanted to say about this character design. My battle priest absolutely loved making this, and I hope some of the steps in my process can help you to make a cooler character design as well. So, as always, happy drawing, and I'll see you in the next one.